Welcome to Wine Library TV. I am your host, Gary Vaynerchuk, and this, my friends, is the Thunder Show, aka the internet's most passionate wine program. And this is a very exciting episode for me. It may end up becoming, I think we're on our way to creating a tradition.
Cool.
We are very fortunate to have a return guest. Why don't you tell the Vayner Nation who didn't catch you last time who you are, what this is, and how we're so lucky to have this in front of us.
Well, this is fresh off the press. The ink is still a little wet. It's our annual buying guide, and I'm Josh Green. I'm the publisher of this magazine, Wine and Spirits magazine, and also the editor. Write a bunch of the profiles that are in here, including profiles of all these 5 wineries that are right here in front of us.
How many people? So there's 100 wines.
There are 100
How
wines.
many people write profiles?
7 of us.
7 of you.
Yep.
And does it really break down to about 13 each or whatever that number
No,
ends up
some of
being,
us do
15
about
each?
20, some of us do 10.
Got it.
It depends on where their specialties lie and what showed really well during the year.
Got it.
So, and like I know most of these folks intimately, and actually Patrick wrote the one on Weimer, and on Andrew Will. And Patricio down in Chile, he covers Spain, but I cover Rioja, but he still covered these guys. So I did Leflevre and I did William Sellium.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So is this even hit the stores yet?
No, it won't be out for another 2 weeks.
So
it literally just got to our office the other day.
got it. So
Yeah.
nobody even knows what the wines are really yet.
Nope. Actually,
So-
they are announced on our website
As of when?
as of the 15th of September. When we
Got
sent
it.
this, when we sent this to our printer, we then put it on the site.
Smart, right?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So do you do it 1 to 100? Do you actually number them?
Nope, they're from all around the world, and each one of them really stands on its own. So there isn't a ranking.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just these are the 100.
Yep.
And do people because their need to rank things think that the first one on here is 1 or the last one on here is 1?
No, because we do it alphabetically.
Got it.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
we do it alpha, and then we do it alpha by country for
Yeah,
the
so it's
importers.
American, and
Yeah.
here we go.
Yeah.
And so you, oh wow, Amabi.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, they did really well. I mean, it's surprising. They're probably one of the least expensive brands that did really well.
Well-
There are a couple. There's we have 2 Finger Lakes brands in Lamoureux Landing. Their wines are in the $15 to $18 range.
what's funny about the Amabi is that we just had Amabi on the show. I just did a
really?
brown paper bag Cabernet tasting, and the Amabi dominated, and I just was blown away by it.
They're making great
For
wine, and they have access to
$20
terrific
stuff.
vineyards. Yeah,
Amazing.
It's an incredible value wine. I mean,
No question.
Yeah, and people don't know much about it.
Good to
but-
see Jim Clendenin on there. And so this is the 24th annual.
Yep, 24th time we've done it.
Are you getting geared up? I mean, let's not overshadow this one, but I mean, is it back? I can't imagine it's not back here a little bit. You're saying, oh crap, next year's 25.
Yeah, well, we did a 25th anniversary issue for the
Magazine itself,
business
right.
as a whole. That was a few years ago.
Yep.
But the 25th anniversary of this will be sort of a special occasion, and we'll we already started in this issue we have a new center spread where we looked at 9 wineries that really caught our attention this last year.
Yes.
So this is something new in this issue, and we'll probably bring out some new stuff next year as well to sort of develop it a bit more. But 25 years is a long time to be doing this.
It sure is. So, we've covered this, and we're going to link up last year's episode because we did a lot of background in the last
Super.
episode
Yep.
together. So we'll give context for people. But, so we'll link that up, Mott. Thank you so much. But for the, people that don't want to go back and that are lazy, what about a 2-minute version of the background of you and Wine and Spirits magazine? The best 240-second, let's give you a couple more time. We'll give you 4 minutes that you can do.
Well, I started in '84 with it. It had been started in '82, and then I purchased it in '89, and that's when we started our restaurant poll back in '89. And 2 years before that, we'd started this.
Got it.
And this sort of started as a outgrowth of our December issue when we looked back over the year and looked at who the wineries were that performed best over the course of the year. And as it grew, we started doing profiles of each of the wineries and basically selected out 100. And then I think this is our 7th year now of doing our Top 100 event in San Francisco.
Yeah, which is a real big deal.
It's a fantastic
I mean,
event.
literally
Yeah.
everybody I talk to that's ever been to it is just blown away by the quality of the event.
Yeah. Well,
Have you ever thought about moving it on the road? I've always had this bad feeling, like I always wanted it to be in New York so I could go.
We are talking about that. I don't think we'll bring it to New York because we do another event in New York from our restaurant.
That's
top
right.
of the list event.
But you might move it
But
somewhere
we
else.
might do 2 cities with that event and 2 cities with our top of the list event.
I see.
Yeah, that's
and
what our
when
plans
is that
are.
event?
That event is October 13th.
Okay.
100 wineries pouring, all the top 100 wineries
So
pouring.
people in San Fran can still get in, or no?
They can still get in. The tickets are ahead of sales from last year, and
is
last
there-
year we sold out. So I think it'll be sold out fairly soon.
So you're talking maybe next couple of days.
Well, no, I mean it sold out last year around the
before?
4 or 5 days before.
Got it. Okay.
So we still have
and is there a
basically
web page where people
about
can
10
buy
days.
tickets if they're in San Fran?
There is wineandspiritsmagazine.com / top 100.
Got it, Mott? Mott, you're good.
What's
Awesome.
cool about the event, and I just want to say
Let's look
this,
that up.
is that there are 10 new and notable restaurants that come,
Okay.
and they all bring incredible food. So it's not just wine, it's wine and food.
Let me ask you a question I did not recall asking you last year. It's called Wine and Spirits Magazine. But, for me, obviously, I'm pretty in the wine, obviously Wine Library carries a lot of spirits, but I've always looked at it as a wine magazine. How much of it, by percentage of coverage, is it wine compared to spirits? And obviously it was called Wine and Spirits. I see enormous energy from you on the wine side. You may have equal as much energy on the spirit side. I don't know that. How much of this is a wine magazine, or is it covering spirits?
It's 90% a wine magazine.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
There is Chris Hollowell, who's our editor in New York. He does a lot of spirits coverage, and he farms out some of it, and he does a lot of it himself. And we've done some cool spirit stuff, but we'll do maybe 3 or 4 major spirit stories a year, and then a lot of new product releases and a lot of coverage of new restaurants that are covering spirits or new bars that are cool that are opening up.
Well, and there's some great ones in San Fran.
Yeah, and there's some great ones in New York too.
Is there a spirits cover? How many spirits actually graze the cover?
We rarely put spirits on the cover.
So
because
that's
our
why
reader,
it is a 90.
Our reader is really a wine reader.
And was it originally, because like you said, you bought it, was it originally going to be kind of a 50-50 thing, and then once you kind of jumped in, you kind of pushed it further towards the wine side?
The market was so different back in the 80s. The wine market was really small, and the wine market is much bigger now.
Dramatically bigger.
So in this country, you can really have a wine-focused magazine, whereas in the 80s, they were all really starting. And spirits now have their own magazines.
Yeah.
There are 3 or 4 spirits-focused magazines, and they really are 2 different audiences. I mean, there's overlap. But the people who are really interested enough to read a wine magazine there's a subset of the people who are really interested enough. There's a subset of those people are the people who are really interested enough to read a spirits magazine.
Sure.
So it's I think for our reader, they're interested in wine.
So what wines are we going to start with?
We're going to start with the reds, actually.
And let's talk about that, because you came in and you set it up, and you're like, we're going to start with the reds. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a fun thing to talk about.
Well, Gary, I set up my whole tasting based on starting with the Riesling and going through. And when Kristen and I opened them up inside and tasted through them, I thought, There's also the fact that if we start with the reds, we're going to go from the far Sonoma coast up through Washington, across to New York State, to Spain, and then to France.
So you kind of like
So
that
it's
a little bit
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Got it.
So it's a nice geographic sort of...
And really, when you look at it, these 2 wines are so big that I can very much see, if I was to taste if I was just to taste, like, without tasting ahead of you, I probably would have started with this, but it very conceivably would have then gone to this, and then I probably would have went here, and then I would have debated between those guys. So, are you concerned, for the people looking at home, when they see an Andrew Will red wine, of this kind of oomph, there's a concern that the next white wine, especially, a Riesling dry, is going to get overpowered. We always hear white to red. What is your thought process?
A lot of people actually like to taste red to white.
I know that subculture very well.
And
the nerds.
Especially, the nerds.
Yep.
And especially, one of the things that occurred to me when I was in the other room looking at these wines is that Riesling, I think, when we taste through them, I think that Riesling will create like a segmentation. We'll say
a transition.
They'll say the reds are gone now. The Riesling has a lot of flavor.
Yep.
And it's really bright and acidic, and it's going to sort of clean up our mouths and help us move on to these more complex older wines.
Let's do it. So let's get into the first wine, Mott. Just move this kind of in an order that allows us to kind of see. So what do we have here? This is the 07 William Salem Pinot Noir. Now these guys are pretty darn legendary.
Yeah. They're legendary, and this particular wine is from a very legendary vineyard. This wine is from the Hirsch Vineyard, which is probably, I have to admit, it's probably my favorite vineyard in California.
Is that right?
It is one of the most beautiful places in the world. It is way out on the coast, so you're up on a ridge, and all you see are far ridges and a few little pockets of vineyards around. You see Flowers, which is right on the next ridge down. There's Precious Mountain, which is another wine that they make that's really great. But one of the things that's interesting about this is that these folks, Dyson, John Dyson bought William Sellium from Ed.
About 5 years ago,
Bert.
maybe more.
I think 10 years ago now. I think in 2000.
That just hurt my feelings.
Yeah. I know, it makes me feel old.
Oh, man.
He bought a vineyard in 2001 and planted it to the exact same variety, the exact same clones of heritage clones of Pinot that Hirsch uses, that Hirsch gives him for this wine.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
it's Mount Eden, it's Swan, and it's Pommard. And this is, to me, what's so great about this wine is that Pommard brightness, the sort of almost like transparent strawberry flavor that it takes on. Hirsch and William Sellium, I think, work really well together. The Hirsch style, the Hirsch fruit, and the William Sellium style of wine.
Are you a fan of the Hirsch Vineyards Pinot Noir itself?
I think that he's going to. I've tasted their 2009s, and they're unbelievable.
It's taken him a while to get there, right?
It's taken him a while to get there. He's worked through a bunch of different winemakers. He's working with Ross Cobb now, who was at Flowers, and Ross is brilliant.
Brilliant wine.
And the two of them together are really cool to see working together. I mean, I think that David is one of the best growers around, and a really sensitive grower, really, really in tune with his vines. And to have the vineyard right there, to have the winery right in the middle of it, it's hard. I think it's been a real challenge to get people, because even Flowers is hard to get people to work at, but he's way much further than Flowers. To get to his place, you drive far and away further than Flowers. And so to get someone to commit to it, it's hard.
I don't know him very well, but I know the vineyard super well. Has he been disappointed that their own family vineyard kind of has not performed as well as a lot of people that use the fruit? It's been a very awkward, from
He's
afar.
Been challenged by it. He's been
from
challenged
afar,
by it. Yeah.
It's a very awkward thing. And if we're getting a little nerdy, Hirsch is this amazing vineyard that there's been multiple producers that have made probably their best Pinot Noir from that vineyard. Meanwhile, their own, Pinot has not been bad in any stretch of the imagination at all. It's been a very solid Pinot, but spotty at times, and almost never to the quality of some of the producers that have been fortunate enough to have the fruit. So it's kind of a weird feeling, right? You're the grower, and there's 6 or 7 other guys, or 5, I don't know how many wineries these days, are making better Pinot than yours, and you should, it's yours. It's just this wild dynamic.
There were a bunch making wine from his fruit for the 90s, and now he's cut it back. Since he's been making his own wine, he's cut it back to select producers who he really has a good sense of how they make their wine. But David, to his credit, he's got a long-term vision. And he wouldn't have planted this place if he didn't have a long-term vision. And when he went into it, he knew it was going to take him time to get to the point where he could make wine of the quality of some of his buyers. Mm-hmm. And he's getting there. I mean, if you
the 09s you're bullish
you should go out and visit the vineyard and taste with Ross.
Yeah.
Because the 09s are
cool.
Gorgeous.
Excited.
Yeah.
All right, so now William Salem, when I was growing up in the wine business in the early 90s, this was like the cult wine. I mean, people used to come in here every weekend, just beg. And I just remember it wasn't even in New Jersey at the time or available. I just remember it was so out there. They were the 2 guys producing amazing Pinot, and everybody wanted it. It was getting huge scores, and you couldn't get it. And it was, I remember when I first finally got it. Oh, it's still that way.
It's still that way, and it's still mainly a mailing list wine.
Yeah.
And in order, they just built a new winery, and in order to get into the winery, you have to be on the mailing list.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a club.
Yeah. It is a club.
I understand that concept.
It is a club.
So what are you getting on the nose?
Well, I usually get a lot of oak on their wines when they're young. But I also get this that fruit character, that sort of spicy strawberry fruit character that I associate with the Pommard clone from Hirsch. And I think that as this wine develops, that'll show up more and more. I mean, we had a 97 that they made from the Hirsch vineyard. That was absolutely gorgeous.
The one thing I think is really interesting about this wine is you do not get, this isn't, it comes from Pommard clone, but this is not going to ever be confused on the nose as a Burgundian wine. This is true and true California,
completely
USA. I mean,
California wine.
you know, I'm not getting the sheep butt in the barnyard and any of that kind of stuff. They're very fruit driven. I get what I call a spicy sour cherry, and so there's the sour cherry kind of thing going on, but there's an underlining spiciness on the nose that I think is quite neat.
What's really interesting is that he's made a new vintage wine from their estate vineyard where they planted all this stuff. They interspersed all these different clones, about I think maybe 18 different clones or something in this little block. He made it without using the Williams-Sellium yeast. All of his Pinots are made with the Williams-Sellium yeast, which was, I think, a Zin ferment from way back when.
Yep.
He makes all the Pinots exactly the same, so you can taste the difference from vineyard to vineyard. But there's no funk in their wines at all. And this wine doesn't have funk, but it has a different kind of complexity because it's got all those different clonal material in it, all mixed together, all co-fermented together.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that I think their wines will taste like 5 or 10 years from now. So I think it's the direction they're moving in. But again, it's not funky old world style. It's a different kind of wine.
It's very vibrant. And there's a little bit of herbaceousness on the back end, which I like quite a bit. There's an herbal kind of component.
I associate that with the sandstone soils out in the coast. You've
Okay.
got all that pine and conifer forest that was there. It was all farmed out and taken down to rebuild San Francisco in the early part of the century, of the 20th century. And that's when they had all these ridges that were opened
After
up.
the fire?
Yeah. And all the centuries and centuries and centuries of that pine stuff building up and the redwood building up, it gives it, it's a very acidic soil, so you get that pungency, that pungent spice.
There's some great minerality here.
Yeah, yeah.
As
Absolutely.
well. I mean, I get
and
almost
a lot
a
of length.
a
It just
lot.
goes on. Yeah.
Very focused Pinot. I like the fruit. Very, very complex. It's a great point. It's a substantially complex Pinot Noir. It's got great body. I would say it's got even a little bit more weight to it on the mid palate transition than I would expect from most Pinot Noirs. $72 suggested retail on this wine, right? So it's far from inexpensive. At the same token, I always feel that American wines in the Pinot Noir category get put to a different standard than the Burgundian wines. There's a lot of very average to solid, very good Pinot Noir coming out of Burgundy in this price range. Meanwhile, when we see a price like this for the top or one of the top Pinot Noirs in America at this price range, there's sometimes a sticker shock, and I always find it to be a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, they're only making a couple wines more expensive than this, and they're sort of special estate selection wines that they're not releasing to the public. So this is one of their most expensive bottlings. And
Really
I
good
think
stuff.
I think for $72 compared internationally to other things that you would find, I think it's a really good deal.
Yeah.
In fact, because as you say, it's got
really
weight,
good.
but it's not in any way heavy.
No.
It's so vibrant and so fresh.
It's kind
that
of
it really just soars. It doesn't sit.
it kind of makes me think of like Indian or Asian cuisine, where you get a
Because
lot of
all that spice,
flavor,
yeah.
but actually yes, and the spice, but actually in a different way. I love when I eat really good raw fish, crudo or sushi. I'm full, but it wasn't heavy.
Yep.
It's not like I ate 4 steaks.
Yep.
And I'm just as full. And that's kind of how this wine comes across to me. It's got the body that's appealed to me, but it's Pinot. It's not like I drank a 17% Zin and I want to take a nap. And so I find it fascinating. To me, this is the kind of wine, just to put in context for you guys, this would be like a 94-point wine to me. I think it's spectacular. Really, really well made. Did you guys score this through the year?
I think I gave it. I gave this a little higher than 94,
Okay.
but they got a 94, 95. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's in there.
Is
It's
it?
one of
We'll
our.
find it.
Yeah, it's
We'll
one of our
find it
top
at the end.
Pinots of the year.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Good start. I'm excited. All right.
I love that wine. 95.
95.
Yeah. So we're right.
Same
yeah.
ballpark. Great wine. All right, so let's move on and rinse with this.
Oh, this will kill the Pinot. It's fine.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good point. But so Andrew Will, I have a great story. I mean, one of my favorite producers out of Washington State. I was so obsessed with finding it. Again, all my favorite stories are when I was a young chap trying to find these cool wines for the store. A Italian-only distributor carried this wine.
Really, here in Jersey.
In New York and New Jersey in 1997, 98,
Oh, you're talking about artisan.
Pena Bianco.
Panabianco had it.
Pena
Really?
Bianco carried Andrew Will and Quisita Creek.
Huh,
And I
that's
called them like,
interesting.
hey, I have a store in New Jersey, or do you distribute in New Jersey? I see you in the beverage media guide. They're like, yeah. I'm like, I want to buy Andrew Will and Quisita Creek. And the guy on the phone was like, really? Because they were like an Italian only, I mean, I bought like 15 cases of Quisita Creek. It was incredible. Not that went on to get, all the crazy press. But the Andrew Will wines, I was so excited. And they were so good. And back then they were still in the 20s, high 20s, like 29. But
But they were great.
Oh, they were great.
I mean, back in the best wines that he made were the late '90s,
And so
they were such
They were
beautiful
so good.
classic Cabernet style wines.
Andrew Will, Champeau, 2007 vintage. And this is a blend, right?
It's Cabernet Franc and Merlot,
Cabernet.
50-50.
no,
There's
this is a
also
different one, right?
there's also Petit Verdot and Cabernet
Yeah,
Sauvignon.
this is
but
not-
it's 50% Franc, and then the rest is
52% Cabernet Franc. So you guys already know I'm excited about that. 19 Cab, 21 Merlot, and 8 Petit Verdot. $68 suggested. Really, really one of the top Washington State producers. I would say that you get anybody into a debate. Top 5 Washington producers. He'll
certainly be in the top 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
for
Bats
me,
and Quisita and
For me, of the Quilcita and him in terms of Cabernet based wines, I think are the top.
at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
How
then
about Bats?
Betts is making really good wine.
You feel like
but
it's the
I
next
don't
tier
think
for you?
I don't think he's at that
At that
level.
level.
And he also, what's great about Chris Camarda is that he has a really strong philosophy behind his wine, and he's had it that way for years.
Thanks, Mark.
And really has been developing his wines philosophically. It's interesting because I don't know of anyone else in Washington who really works that way. There's some younger guys that are, like Greg Harrington.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, he started with a
he's-
philosophy and tried to make his wines to that philosophy.
He's awesome.
and that's what
New York
They
guy.
both came out of the restaurant business.
Yeah.
So he started in '89, and as you say, the wines at the end of the '90s.
I mean, those
fantastic.
wines were freaking me out. I remember recommending them to people who came in and said, hey, do you have Chateau Montelena or KMS? I was like, yeah. Here they are. By the way, take one bottle. What is this? Washington? I mean, remember, this is still like before Washington really, I was like, trust me. Really, that's the core of how we built Wine Library, by giving those kind of recommendations.
But one of the things that really excited me about being in Washington this spring was to taste Chris's 2007s, to taste a bunch of 2007s. They are of the quality and of the style that made Washington famous in the late '90s. It had like a really the temperature dropped off at the end of the season. They have this cool. They're rich, but they have this coolness. They have this beautiful just.
Do you
fruit
feel
character.
like do you feel? I always felt that Washington. What I really loved about it, and I thought they lost their way a little bit when the Walla Walla explosion happened. I always felt that they had almost Bordeaux-like sensibility. That they were always like a hair lower than the than the California wines, and it hit my palate right. I mean, not that who doesn't want to have a Dominus or Insignia, and those wines were exciting to me. Robert Craig Affinity and Flora Springs and Schaefer, and I love that. But I remember there being that period in time, 1999 to 2001, 1998 to 2000,
Exactly.
where I felt like the top wines from Washington State, Cabernet-based wines, Leonetti, that they were just a hair less explosive, and made me feel like it was it was almost like the imaginary blend in my mind of a California wine and a Bordeaux wine, and I feel like that's the style that I've always looked for from these guys. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
I think that in 2007 you'll find that again. And what was interesting was I was talking to.
I mean, the nose on this is incredible.
I was talking to Chris because when I was up there tasting with him, I noticed that his alcohol levels that's 14.7. It's not
Right.
it's not a low alcohol
No,
wine.
it's not. It's a big alcohol wine.
And yet it doesn't taste it doesn't taste hot. There's no heat in it at all. So we were doing a project on alcohol in wine, and I called him up and I said, what is it that's different about your wine or the wines I was tasting in 2007 that doesn't make me feel like I'm getting that heat? And his point was this coolness at the end of the season. Like in California, you get heat spikes at the end of the season, their temperature drops off. And so you get a ripening period where the acidity is sustained in the grapes.
Which is huge.
And
it doesn't spike.
the acidity,
The
he
sugar
was saying
levels.
that the acidity and the tannin work very differently in a wine like this than they would in a Napa Valley wine. So that you don't get the heat, you don't get that sort of that warmth at the end at all. He also said something interesting. He said that a lot of wines that have this big blast of flavor, you call them fruit bombs or even oak monster wines, that people talk about them being liqueur-like, and
Yep.
he said, liqueur is not wine. A wine has a beginning, a middle, and then an end, and he wants his wines to go that way. He doesn't want this big blast.
Sure.
He wants it to be something that unfolds over time.
Do you feel that that big blast was a situation where winemakers were starting to try to create wines that would appease critics early on in the process?
I think that definitely has a lot to do with it. I mean,
Yeah.
I won't go to taste Bordeaux at the En Primeur offering because I think it's a zoo, and they're making wines. A lot of people there are making wines specifically
For that moment.
for that moment.
Because that's driving the market.
And that's not what is interesting to me about Bordeaux at all. This is more Bordeaux-like than a lot of Bordeaux wines.
It's really crazy. So
It's actually sweeter than Bordeaux
what are you
wines.
getting on the nose? Because the nose to me is downright incredible.
Well, you get the Cabernet Franc. I mean, you definitely get the Cabernet
Yeah,
Franc.
I
in the
love
nose.
the fact that this smells a little more like a Chinon than like an over-oaked. I had a stepping stone from Cornerstone Cabernet Franc that smelled like a Shiraz. I mean, it was like you couldn't pay somebody to say it was Cabernet Franc. Whereas here, you do get a little of that green vegetal, but it's surrounded by other flavors. Like it's almost like a imaginary blend of a vegetable and a fruit salad, which I think is really appealing.
You get a lot of fruit, and certainly Petit Verdot is adding to that fruit
Yeah, it's
character.
inky
Yeah.
and dark.
But the difference, I mean, for me, I don't like vegetal wines that are heavy.
Right.
But if a wine has a sort of a green herb spice or a green herb freshness to it,
That
I
this
like
has.
that.
Me
Yeah.
too. It appeals to me quite a bit. It appeals to me quite a bit. I mean, I'm a real big fan of this nose. Cabernet Franc, 50%. It's going to come across. There's a little pepper on the nose as well, and it smells delicious. So let's give it a whirl.
Yeah, you could drink that without having to swallow it. It's again, it's like what you were saying about the William Sulliam. It has volume, it has depth, but it's not. There's no heaviness to it at all. It's really concentrated, really silky, and yet it's not at all heavy. It's absolutely beautiful.
This is really nice.
Yeah.
I mean, this is spectacular. Now, 68 is the suggested retail, right?
Yep.
So that
Which
means
is a steal. I mean, you look at Nap Valley Cabernets of this quality.
the best part to me is you could probably then find it in the high 50s or
Yeah,
mid 50s
probably.
retail if that's suggested retail.
Yeah.
This wine is massively explosive, great red, and this is red and dark. This is red and dark fruits.
It's all different layers of fruit, and I
Right?
think that with 10 years of age, this thing is just going to be. It'll knock you away. It'll just completely knock you
Yeah,
out.
to me, this is a creme de la creme example of what can happen in Washington State. I mean, this is what's so fun. I mean, this is why I think we have Josh on the show. He brings these ridiculous wines that everything's going to do probably well. You never know, but I mean, this is really, really good. To me, this is the kind of Cabernet-based, call it Franc or Sauvignon-based wines that really, really, really remind me why this is a big-time kind of varietal and style in the world. I'm just really, really impressed with this. It has great length, and really, this is a turn back the clock wine for me. This goes back to the style of wine that I really enjoyed. And by the way, nothing for nothing, this is what California wine tasted like to me in the 91 vintage.
This is very much like a 91 California.
You know what I
wine.
mean?
That's a really good point, actually.
Yeah, you know,
because
this was the
those are
style.
wines that I loved. 91
Love.
California Cabernet is fantastic.
Are
and
you
it's
a
still
little, are you a
alive.
hair miffed with where California Cab went in the late mid 2000s on?
It's not been a style that I appreciate, and I still find there are some really great vineyards.
Is there a
that-
pushback going on?
There is,
Are we
but there is also, when we were working on this alcohol issue, I talked to a lot of growers who I really respect about the alcohol levels in their Cabernet, and a lot of them were sort of embarrassed by the fact that their bottle stated like 14.5, and their wine was 15.4. They were just living on the edge of
being
what was
allowed to
legal.
do that, yeah.
And
1% plus minus plus and minus,
Yep.
right? That you're allowed to kind of name the wine
Yep.
that alcohol. So if you see 14.5 on it, it could be 13.5, it could be 15.5.
yeah, and these are big, rich, explosive, flavorful wines. They're not. I mean, I don't have a problem with the quality of the wine, but I have a problem drinking a whole bottle of it. This I could drink a whole bottle of.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily. I'm completely blown away by this wine. Great length. I love that there's like a bitter chocolate flavor component.
The tannins are beautiful.
Gorgeous.
The tannins they're not
too
heavy.
sweet. They're not too
Yeah.
sweet, but they're not bitter dry.
Yeah, and they're
Balance.
completely
It's a fantastic
they're silky tannins.
To me, this is the kind of, people talk about Meritage blend. Meritage has some legal ramifications. You got to do it the right way. But this is the kind of red blend that blows me away. This is kind of why I like Bordeaux right here. It is a hair sweeter than you're going to see from Bordeaux. Though the 2003 vintage, this is kind of the style. This is actually even calmer than a lot of 03s. To me, this is a bombastic effort from Washington State. I'm going to score it 95 points. I think it is spectacular.
And Patrick gave it a 96. Yeah.
Cool.
This was
Yeah.
his favorite wine of. I think it's his
incredible.
favorite wine of the year. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Incredible stuff.
It's pretty great wine.
Great
I
wine.
mean, what's great about it is it leaves your mouth feeling fresh. You don't feel like you've had this big glob of fruit in your mouth.
1,000%. I'm blown away by where the palate is at this point. That's the point. Both those wines, and that's really kind of a style that I hope emerges in the wine world, where we can really get all these great flavors and enjoy it, and not feel like we got to take naps after that.
Yep.
I mean, it was hard to go to a 2005 California Cabernet tasting. After 4 or 5 wines, it was like, you get there.